Hey, what's up everyone? Good evening. This is episode 26 of Healthy Kids, Simple Solutions. I'm Dr. Steven Stinout here in Elkhorn. And what we're going to be talking about today is anxiety and the three most common things I see in my patients who are experiencing anxiety. And I'm sure we've all experienced, anxious feelings, but what I'm talking about is if it becomes a really chronic thing that's happening every day and every week, and you're always in this elevated state and you can't seem to shake it. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today is chronic anxiety. And I know the title of the episode is Healthy Kids, Simple Solutions, and there are a ton of kids who are struggling with anxiety, but this also is going to pertain to adults and if they're struggling with anxiety as well. So to get into it, what are the three things that I see in patients that have anxiety? And the first thing is they usually have some type of a gut issue. That's usually the number one thing I see, and that's causing them to be very inflamed. So what I mean by that is I got these cool balls from Soul and Swag, but I'm going to put it away for a second. So what I mean by that is if you have a gut and it's supposed to be like this and nothing's supposed to get in and out of it, and if it becomes leaky and permeable and food particles can pass through it, what happens is if you eat something you're sensitive to, the most common thing is like gluten. Let's say you eat it, it's supposed to go in and stay there and get digested and everything's good. But what happens is if it begins to get leaky and gluten starts to seep out into the bloodstream undigested, the body sees it and it gets really confused because it doesn't know what it is, and then it attacks it. So it starts attacking something that's fairly harmless, and then that creates this big inflammatory loop. And what that does is it really stresses out the body and can contribute to anxiety. So the first thing that I always recommend to anyone that's struggling with anxiety is really address the gut and really pay attention to the foods that you're sensitive to. So the most common thing by far and away that I find is gluten. The number one thing I always recommend people that are struggling with anxiety to cut out is gluten. Cut out, I always say if you imagine that old food pyramid, it's that last row. It's the bread and the pasta and the donuts and anything that's like floury and bready and pancakes and that type of stuff you want to cut out. And that is because people are usually pretty sensitive to it, and it can cause a lot of inflammation in the body. And when your body gets really inflamed, you start to feel anxious. So I always start with addressing the gut and fixing that leaky gut. The second thing that I see in people with anxiety is a Moreau reflex. And what a Moreau reflex is if you imagine an infant, if you were to go up and either clap by an infant or if you were to hold them and then kind of drop them abruptly, they're going to put their hands out and take a deep breath in and shake a little bit and probably start crying. They're going to get startled. That's their Moreau reflex. And this is a reflex we have to kind of get us along and help survive. And then at about 4 to 6 months of age, it should go away. But what happens with some people is they hold on to it, and they hold on to it through adulthood, or at least through school age and then on to adulthood. So if you're walking around with this Moreau reflex, essentially what's happening is you're getting startled all the time. If there's a really loud bang, or a locker closes, or something comes in and out of vision, or basically all these types of stimuli are really they're triggering a what's the word I'm looking for? They're triggering a stress response. They're triggering you to get startled. So you're walking around all day and you're getting startled by these things that shouldn't startle you because you have this Moreau reflex still from when you're an infant that should have went away, but it didn't. So that's always the next thing that I check for in people is if they have this Moreau reflex. And the best way you can kind of tell if you have it is if there's loud noises and you hate them and you kind of jump every single time it happens, you probably have a Moreau reflex because it becomes reflexive. And you should be able to, if there's a loud noise, repetitive noise, you should be able to kind of zone it out. But if you have a Moreau reflex, you have a really hard time doing that. So that's the second thing I always check for in people. That is absolutely going to contribute to anxiety. And the third thing that I see in people that have anxiety is an imbalance in their vestibular system. So what this is the balance system that's inside your ear. It helps us keep our head on straight. It helps us balance so we're not falling over all the time. Usually there's one side that's significantly stronger than the other. So there's probably always going to be one that's a little bit stronger, but if it's outside of the normal, then that's really what we're looking for. So if you think of, if you see someone that really has kind of a big, like shoulder down, head to the side, that could be a really good indicator that your vestibular system's off, or it doesn't have to be quite that drastic. Another thing that I usually see is if you have someone put one foot in front of the other, almost like a sobriety test, and then you see if they can balance. And if they can't balance there, then it's really bad because that's their vestibular system and their eyes can't coordinate. But if they're fine and they can balance like that, and then you tell them to close their eyes, and then they start moving all over the place and they can't keep their balance, that's a really good indicator that their vestibular system is off and one side's much stronger than the other. And then you can take it a further and stand on one leg and then close your eyes. And then if you start really swaying around, that's a good indicator that your vestibular system is not where it needs to be. So if you have anxiety, the three things I always check for are 1, gut health and inflammation. 2, do you have that Moreau reflex that's constantly startling you? The reflex you had as an infant should have went away, but in some people it doesn't. And 3rd, is your vestibular system off? So if you try to balance on one leg or balance with one foot in front of the other and close your eyes, do you go all over the place? So what you're doing is you're really closing your eyes, because if your vestibular system's off, we just use our eyes to balance us. But if you take that away, you become really unsteady and start swaying all over the place. If that's the case, if your vestibular system's not able to keep you up, it's going to be chronically stressing out the brain. If you imagine your brain getting input from your vestibular system that you never really have full balance, that's going to stress the brain out. That's going to put you kind of in that survival state where you're always in this elevated state and you can't ever turn it off, especially like at nighttime to go to bed. So what I always recommend to people is, if you think this is you, 1, you can always schedule a consult and just discuss this and see if that might be what you're experiencing. Or 2, if you're like, yeah, I hate loud noises, I think I have that Moreau reflex, and then I tried to balance on one leg and I closed my eyes and I couldn't do it for more than a couple seconds. I want to do an exam and see what you find. So what we do is a full exam and nerve system testing. We see how elevated of a state are you in, and then from there we see what state, what primitive reflexes do you have, what's your vestibular system like, and then we check all these different things, and then I'm able to have a really good idea of what you need to get better and to fix those things. So that's what I have for you for anxiety. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm trying to think if I missed anything that I wanted to say. I can't think of anything right now. If I remember it, I'll put it in the comments. But with that, if you do want to schedule something, our number is 402-504-4676. That's the best way to contact us. I'm glad you guys jumped on, and I will see you guys tomorrow evening for episode 27 of Healthy Kids, Simple Solutions. Thank you for jumping on tonight. I'll see you guys later.